gives me a great pleasure to welcome you to the 16th edition of School of Tomorrow events, Guardians of the Future Shaping Tomorrow with Generative AI. The non-profit SOT event series was launched by Beacon House in year 2000 to engage global communities in conversations that shape the future of schools and societies. I would like to thank Google for Education and their partner Tech Valley, the lead sponsor for SOT 2023, and our titanium sponsor United Bank Limited. Other key sponsors include My Backpack, MK Books International, Allied Bank Limited, Franklin Covey, Habib Bank Limited, Watheen, and Interwood. We also thank our SOT supporters including Paramount Books and Nestle Pure Life who have contributed to this year's event. My name is Mohammed Qasim, and I am an IGCSE and A-Levels mathematics teacher at Beacon House Potoha campus. Please take a moment to note these important housekeeping points. Please ensure your cell phones are on silent. In case of an emergency, the exit point is located at the back of this hall. You may use the staircase opposite to this hall. In case if it is blocked or packed, you may use the one on the right-hand side. Always stay calm and follow directions. Please use the SOT app to scan the QR code for session question answer and feedback. Share your thoughts on social media using hashtags, hashtag Guardians of the Future, and hashtag SOT2023. If you need assistance, our ushers are here to help. For questions, please either use the flashcards provided by the ushers or the mobile app. The panel discussion will last for about 45 minutes, followed by 15 minutes for question and answers. I would like to invite the moderator of the session, Mr. Azam Ali Noon, on the stage and introduce the panelists. Mr. Azam is currently the head of academics at The Educators. He has an MPhil in educational leadership and school improvement from the University of Cambridge. He also holds an MA degree from the Pennsylvania State University on the Fulbright Scholarship. Mr. Azam has over a decade of working experience in the education sector, both nationally and internationally. He is also an educational consultant for public education programs with organizations such as Adam Smith International and Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office. Mr. Azam.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Qasim. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 16th edition of the School of Tomorrow conference. Today, the topic at hand is workplace harassment training. Is it an effective tool or just box ticking? Workplace harassment training is emerging as a focal point for organizations aiming to create safer and more inclusive work environments. Yet, the efficacy of such training is a topic of debate. Several studies highlight its limited impact. While some praise it as a critical step towards sensitizing employees and preventing harassment, critics argue that it sometimes serves as a mere formality, a box to be ticked rather than a genuine effort. Should the emphasis be on refining these training modules, or should we reconsider our approach altogether, searching for more effective means to combat harassment? This session seeks to understand the factors that can truly make such training transformative and effective. Before we start, I'd like to introduce my esteemed panelists. To my left, we have Ms. Shayan Malik. Ms. Shayan Malik is the founder and president of Save Our Children Foundation, which is an organization for the education and rehabilitation of street children. She is also the CEO of Samanzar, a design enterprise. She has taken many training programs in rural villages all over Pakistan, setting up skill centers and doing market linkages for displaced refugee and rural communities, contributing to an informal economy for marginalized youth and women, providing them access to trainings, skill enhancement, and equal opportunity. Ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Shayan Malik. To her left, we have Ms. Muniza Bhatt, who is a partner in KPMG Pakistan and has the distinction of being the first lady partner in the Big Four audit and advisory chartered accountant firms of Pakistan. She is also an elected member of the Southern Regional Committee of ICAP, as well as a mentor for accounting professionals through the ICAP mentorship program. She has also received numerous notable awards for her contribution to the finance and audit sector. Ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Muniza Bhatt. To her left, we have Ms. Sabahat Bukhari, who is the Director of Diversity and Inclusion at Jazz Telecom Pakistan. She has extensive experience in human resource management and is a credited gender diversity professional from INSEAD, as well as a certified strategy and sustainability professional. Her credentials exemplify her commitment to creating equitable and empowering workplaces. With a clear mission to cultivate cultures of belonging, she collaborates closely with executive stakeholders to ensure diversity and inclusion to promote high performance of employees. Ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Sabahat Bukhari. Last but not least, our gentleman panelist, Mr. Sajjad Parmar, is joining us online. Sajjad Parmar is the CEO and founder of the Talent Accelerator. He has over 2 decades of global HR experience working in leadership roles for Fortune 500 companies like Unilever, GlaxoSmithKline, and eBay. He launched the Talent Accelerator with the goal of assisting companies in establishing robust HR, total reward standards and structures that enhance company performance, optimizing employee costs while fostering employee engagement and boosting productivity through effective HR and total rewards programs. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Sajjad Parmar. Sajjad, can you hear us loud and clear?
He can hear us.
Fantastic. With that, let's get the discussion underway. And my first question is for Ms. Shayan Malik. Before we start the discussion on harassment, it's really important to establish what is and what isn't harassment. Could I please ask you to elaborate on the definition?
Thank you. I'll try my best. Harassment is an unwelcome conduct, and most of the harassment does occur in workplaces, and it occurs by someone who has some form of power over someone they're working with, their subordinate, who they realize that, this person might or might not do as I wish, knowing fully well that maybe what they are requesting is not completely legal. So here we come to the sexual harassment, which we always talk about. But actually harassment is not only to do with sexual inclinations, it can be both gender equal. It can be harassment of a woman done by a man, or it can be harassment of a man done by a senior man or done by a senior colleague or a boss. But harassment overall has a very negative effect on who the harassment is occurring with, because it can make someone extremely uncomfortable, can also make them mentally distressed, and it is a behavior which should not be accepted at any workplace and should be recognized, and especially organizations should have clear definitions of harassment, and all employees of all organizations should be very clear about what constitutes harassment and what is acceptable, what is not acceptable. That is how I see harassment.
No, thank you so much for also elaborating on how it is not just one gender, kind of enforcing harassment on another gender, but it includes every gender. Can I please ask Ms. Muniza some questions as well? As a woman who has risen up the ranks and proven her mettle in a male-dominated industry, which is finance and chartered accountancy, what has your experience been with the evolving understanding of harassment?
Okay, thank you, Azam. And I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me to speak over here. SOT has always been one of my favorite conferences to speak on because I find the topics and the themes very futuristic and forward-looking. And now coming back to your question, so yes, chartered accountancy and I think finance professional in general has been male dominated. It, in previous years I could say it was like a men's club or a boys club or a brotherhood, where they had their own set of jokes or terminologies or, stuff that, boys would just consider to be very appropriate while discussing, in the corporate environment as well. And the women were very few and far between. So, I think that the lack of empathy, because they would not know how to deal with a woman in a team. There would be a lot of uncomfort between the two genders, I would say, a woman who's in a boardroom. And even the men would feel very awkward. They would not know how to behave and what to say. And they would unconsciously maybe, pass certain statements which would not be actually appropriate, I think, if a female is there. But I think it has come a long way, and as you mentioned, inclusion and diversity and appropriate awareness and trainings have not eliminated, I can't say it's eliminated, but it surely, I believe, has brought a lot of perspective to the situation, where people now are more aware of how they need to behave and how they need to conduct, what terminologies are acceptable or not acceptable. So as Shayan just said, it all boils down to comfort level, because there are times, when you develop such a camaraderie between your male colleagues also, that you yourself start using that terminology being, a woman. But the thing is, the comfort level has always to be maintained. If you feel uncomfortable, awkward in a certain situation, then naturally you need to speak out, and, it means that before it leads to something greater, I think you just need to call it out.
Absolutely, absolutely. Ms. Sabahat, according to Mediate.com, 90% of workplace harassment is not reported. What do you think are some of the reasons for that in a Pakistani context?
Thank you, and thank you, audience, for being here. It's quite an enlightenment to see so many people interested in the topic. Building on both of the arguments that we have shared, I think the most important area in harassment not being reported is not having the understanding of it, and the element of shock in it. Because when you are with people, and especially in the environment which is male dominated, then female, ability dominated, then persons with disabilities, neurotypical dynamic, then neurodiverse people, all of them feel a little intimidation by underrepresentation. And they try to adjust by making friends, by lowering down their boundaries to a level where they can understand and extend their trust. Harassment by definition happens when those boundaries are crossed. So first element of non-report occurs because you start doubting yourself. Was it harassment? Was I being uncomfortable unnecessarily? Am I being too sensitive? Which are all the comments that we've been hearing about it. And very interesting thing to know about it, that harassment is very black and white. You've been harassed in a very comfortable situation, you will know instantly. You will be harassed by or bullied by a person who you trusted. There is a trigger which will tell you this is crossing the line. But the element of unaware population about it is actually the justification of it as well. Oh, I was just joking. You are being too sensitive. And you also start doubting yourself because there is a lot of internalized misogyny. There is a lot of internalized operative mechanism that ability is something neurotypical or physical ability is something to be dominated. So persons with disability, women, neurodiverse, they start adjusting to a level where they can get harassed and they will not even have an objective opinion about it because they will start doubting themselves.
Very interesting. I saw a lot of members of the audience nod. Perhaps it is relatable, where we gaslight ourselves into thinking that we are overreacting or not knowing who to report to, how to go about it. So very interesting points that you've touched upon. So now I want to actually bring in a slightly contentious area that we were discussing earlier. And this is for the entire panel. So my question is harassment a subjective or an objective phenomena? And could I be feeling harassed when my line manager is just a hard taskmaster? So first I'm going to ask Ms. Sabahat to give some insights into this.
So I just would say, harassment, bullying, sexual harassment are all very black and white. It's an objective, planned activity. I very carefully use planned because the person who is perpetrator, they know what they're doing. And they do it on the basis of their knowledge. Experience, however, can be subjective, which means that if I am aware of my boundaries, then I would be immediately picking it up like that. And if I am not, then I will consider it hard taskmaster, or I'm being too sensitive, or this is how it works and I need to fit in. And that's where I definitely work about the belongingness, and that's where my whole heart goes in, is that while we say that it can be different, perceptions can be different, I can perceive something as harassment, another can feel something as frankness, we are going against the essential definition of the harassment. That harassment is very clearly uncomfortable situation, which is for everyone uncomfortable. You will not be, for example, I would be meeting someone and my boundaries are that I can shake hand with the opposite gender, I can probably hug it as well. But I will definitely know that I am being harassed during the interaction or not. So it is a very clear indicator. It is, however, how I experience it and how do I report it and how do I actually explain that experience to myself first and then to others, and what are the systems that are designed to share that experience is all where the details, the devil in that detail is. Because when you say that it is a subjective experience, the person will always be feeling hesitant about actually pinpointing, no, this was not a healthy interaction. If the culture is not supporting, you will always be creating that boundary for yourself first and start doubting yourself first. So your experiences can be subjective. Your processes may not be systemically supportive, but the process of harassment, bullying, sexual harassment, even microaggressions, even microbullying and microharassment is very clear, objective, planned, black and white action.
Thank you for that elaboration. Ms. Sabahat Bukhari is taking a very hard line on it being black and white, how it is entirely a objective phenomena. And earlier we were coming up with this analogy where, you know, if I run a traffic signal, if I cross a red light, and if I get caught, I'm stopped and I'm given a challan, I'm given a fine. But when have I crossed a line in a workplace? And Ms. Bukhari has very clearly told us that I think part of knowing that this is a traffic signal and you are about to cross it is very important.
Yes.
Miss, yes, please.
So, I feel like, harassment is a whole process. It's, it starts like with a few out-of-line comments, bullying, and then it boils down to harassment actually. So for me, I would believe that, it is not as objective, it is something very subjective. Like, for example, if I can just build on to the example of the handshake, like I have certain clients like where they shake hands normally, okay, but then if you see German people, I'm not categorizing anybody, but they are very warm-hearted, like, very strong people. So they would shake the hand very vigorously, and it would be the same whether it is a woman or a man in front of them. So, for me to then feel that, oh, they have shaken it so vigorously because I'm a woman. So I'm just building on to that example. So what I would tend to like believe is harassment is something very subjective. I think it may make one person uncomfortable, but the other person might not feel as uncomfortable and take it in the same manner. But yes, if it builds on with certain other inappropriate behavior, then naturally it would tend to end up like that. So I think it varies from case to case and circumstance to circumstance, and it would not be so black and white. It would need to be seen in what circumstances and what the whole scenario is. So I would tend to believe that it's slightly subjective.
Absolutely, not black and white, but many shades of gray.
Yeah.
Ma'am, Ms. Shayan, would you like to add to that?
Well, I will add to this as well, because I like the example which you gave of a traffic light. If you run a traffic light, you will get fined. And it's the same with harassment. I tend to agree that there is black and white. As in law, there is black and white. Maybe somebody from a different cultural background, does not know what are the acceptable cultural norms in one organization. And they might do it once. And, in that way, it can be taken, okay, but whoever experiences it has the right to back off and say, this is not acceptable to me, please. Or you can even do it just by a gesture, moving back. The person needs to understand and recognize where their limits are. If those limits are crossed again, another time, it becomes very, I think, subjective then. And that is where the black and white areas are actually defined.
Absolutely. I like, of course.
So a very interesting thing in the definition itself, and Shayan very beautifully put it out, that harassment is an uncomfortable situation not once, right? Because it is done once, you can think of it, maybe I'm taking it reference, and it's okay. But the definition of harassment say that it's a pattern, number one. Number two, there is an element of power. When there is an element of power and there is a pattern, this is definitely harassment. And that is why the definition say uncomfortable situation in hostility in the environment. So if you do not bow down to the power, the hostile situation gets up, and then you are pushed to non-retaliating behavior, and that's where it becomes really very serious. However, what about people who keep testing the boundaries? Because they know exactly what they're doing, right? You keep telling yourself, you keep telling yourself that these are my boundaries. For example, a very harmless good morning, Juma Mubarak, which is very, very popular these days. And you exactly know, and many people, both men and women, will understand where it becomes harassment, right? And where it actually threatens your cultural boundaries. Why the hell a person who met me just yesterday will keep sending me good morning every day? It means they are testing the boundaries. Where are my boundaries, and where can I, give it a little definition, and then that, perpetrator will come in and destroy your boundaries like anything. And then you keep struggling to recreate those boundaries. Now, this entire experience is where I say it's subjective. But perpetrator always know what they're doing. So it's not subjective for them.
And Ms. Bukhari, you've touched upon that slow, gradual build-up to a critical event, which is definitely harassment, but perhaps good morning messages, continual, are not. Thank you so much.
Grooming.
Grooming, exactly. Exactly.
Grooming. We always say that this is what is happening.
I want to try again with the Sajjad Parmar. So my question is still the same, which was essentially, you see, in the reporting of it, committees have to be formed, reports have to be written with these strict timelines, etc., etc. It's work. It can be tiring. But in the day-to-day routine, how do organizations create space and encourage reporting on incidents of harassment?
Yeah. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you, G.
Okay. Okay, great, thank you. Apologies for the technical issue. So I think two parts to the question. The first one I think is around companies having the structure and frameworks, a team perhaps or an individual in the team that is responsible for managing these issues. And the second part of this is how do you create the environment, a culture where employees feel safe to raise their voices against any of these. So first part, I would say that based on my experience, and I'm providing a little bit of a corporate lens, I think most public listed companies actually usually have a structure and framework in place where if an incident gets reported, there is a team of individuals who actually get involved. So much so that I think there are very policies, disciplinary harassment policies in place, which even have in some cases a tiered system where if a incident of level 1 gets reported, then they know exactly who's going to handle it, what the escalation point is going to be, and who has to make the decision, right? And obviously, some incidents are simpler, some incidents are not that simple, and in some cases, I'm aware, these investigations actually go into weeks because there's not enough evidence, right? So to summarize, companies do have in place, large public listed companies, multinational companies do have this in place already. Unfortunately, and this is again not just in Pakistan but globally, private companies do not have these structures in places. To that extent, the level of governance that we see in public listed companies is also missing in private companies, and a lot of things do tend to get overlooked, which is not ideal. So, if we want to create an environment where employees feel safe to raise concerns and voices, we have to, number one, create a structure, a framework where it's clear that there is a process through which these incidents can be notified and actions can be taken. Second part, to get a little bit to elaborate a little bit more. Look, when you want to create a behavior change, and reporting an incident is a behavior change, right? It's a behavior, perhaps mindset change as well. You have to create an environment where these things get reported. You have to talk about them. You have to normalize them to an extent where employees are not. Something happens, an employee has no idea what to do. I think we've already heard from our panelists that sometimes employees just don't know what to do. If we are talking about this, if we have upskilled our employees, if we have talked this, the CEO down to the leaders are talking about this, over a period of time, you're going to normalize this discussion. You're going to normalize an employee being a little bit more comfortable raising their voices and reporting it. And I think any behavioral change, any mindset change takes a fair bit of time. So you start this journey right now for a company, it's not going to happen overnight. We already talked about that employees don't even understand to a great extent that they are being harassed, they're being bullied. Different forms of harassment is taking place, right? So I think we have to start with educating, creating awareness, and hopefully over a period of time, with putting the right structures and frameworks in place, we will hopefully get to a point where employees will start to feel comfortable if something wrong has happened to report that.
Sajjad, thank you so much for that description, kind of like laying out the roadmap and how it will be gradual. Thank you so much. I want to juxtapose that by asking Ms. Shayan, with your extensive experience in working in rural areas of Pakistan and as founder of Save Our Children Foundation, what is the incidence or experience of harassment in this informal startup space? What is that like?
Actually, I just want to make a comment about what Sajjad Sahab was just saying, and this is very right, that policies have to be put into place. If you do not have the policies, you will not get the systems. And then, of course, it will be just a box ticking of every organization that, okay, we've covered it. And because it's really important, and it's important that an employee of an organization feels comfortable enough to report the incident. And it's really important that a person, another colleague, seeing that harassment occurring, doesn't just look the other way and doesn't just keep quiet about it, because everyone should have the confidence that if a certain harassment is reported, it's not going to be put under the carpet. There are people who are specialized in this. Those people have to be in companies and organizations who develop that trust level for an employee, that you can go to them and they will be non-judgmental about what you are saying. In the rural areas and in the informal sectors, I do a lot of training with police, and this question comes up again and again, that if we report, or we have the duty to report, which we are always emphasizing, that there is a duty to report. It's a duty. It's even a civil right, that if you see something occurring which is not acceptable, then speak up about it, because 2 voices and 3 voices have more power than just a single person talking about it. And in villages, a lot of harassment is done by the families themselves, and we've set up skill centers where we encourage entrepreneurs to come, make their products, then sell their products. And somehow or the other, it is people buying their products, or people who have the power to pay for their products, harass the women especially, because they think that they can bully them into giving them a very low wage. That is also the harassment which occurs. Families also harass people who do start earning, because they feel very underconfident that now this person will suddenly have a voice, and we're not going to allow that person to have a voice if they have economic independence. That's where the harassment occurs. And how we have dealt with it in an informal way is that we have included all the elders of the community, the imams, the people who are there to make decisions, to talk to them about how women, youth, young men be allowed to actually be independent. It's the independence which one feels very insecure about. That's where the harassment occurs.
Absolutely, I like how you've also emphasized the role of the witness, because I read somewhere that 90% of harassment has a witness and yet still goes unreported. So if you witness or see something, you should say something as well. Ms. Sabahat talked about microaggressions earlier. I just wanted to explore that a little bit. It's part of harassment, but what exactly is a microaggression?
I give an analogy, and I think everyone will relate to it. Paper cut. Now talk about 1,000 paper cuts on your hand and applying a hand sanitizer on it. That's what microaggression do. And many people have faced it, regardless of gender. आज जल्दी जा रहे हैं, हाफ डे ले लिया, आप तो छुट्टी गुजार के आई हैं. See, everyone knows.
It's so
It's
relatable.
there. It's there. And when we say, tell me about it, I face it every day, right? So microaggression is that joke that is cracked, sometimes knowingly, sometimes unknowingly. But it is done so many times, then it stop becoming joke, it starts hurting. And that's where I often say that harassment is an end occurrence. There are a lot of build-up, lot of acceptable behaviors. ये इस तरह के jokes are already allowed in our informal situation. And we say, we were just joking, loosen up, you're so uptight. And it's for men as well. For a person with disability, a small act of helping a person with disability without their consent is a microaggression. People don't understand that. Microbullying, setting up a goal which is of no value to the organization, will stop your career. You can't pinpoint it, there is no proof, there is no witness, and it keep happening and happening and happening, and the other person is getting frustrated. And by definition of harassment is hostile environment for the growth. So the end result may be harassment, but it keeps building up, building up, building up, and then it stops framing yourself into a healthy environment. A very important aspect to it, we talked about reporting, we talked about the witnessing. Again, the devil is in the detail. It's not about you can report or you have a voice. It is what happens when you speak up. The policy in so many organizations exists, but what happens when this policy has to be implemented? Is the investigation done by someone who is not well trusted in the organization? There is no point having an investigation, right? If the information that you're sharing is not saved with the person, then nobody will come forward and share the witness. So the policy is one angle to it, but the culture of speaking up is not built on one day, is not built on process. It's about when a power person is held accountable after a complaint is made. And I'll go a little further than that. The culture of speak up, the culture of harassment and microaggression is, and you laugh at it, the feeling that you have on Sunday evening about your work in morning. That's the culture. That's your microaggression, speak up, policies, everything is on one hand. That anxiety in your, somewhere in your stomach, that cringe feeling, you know exactly what you're dealing with. If that is handled, your training is done well.
Swa, thank you so much. I think everyone needed to hear that. What you said was so relatable, like, one paper cut and it's nothing. But if I experience 1,000 and then someone pours sanitizer on it, my life is a living hell. And like you said, until I have a safe space to go to someone with the confidence that something's going to be done about it, that's organizational culture. That's where change needs to happen. Now, I do want to take the discussion to the other side of the coin, where someone says that they have experienced a paper cut when there hasn't been one. So what I'm actually talking about is false reporting. And I want Ms. Muniza Bhatt to please elaborate a little bit on this. What do you think are the implications of false reporting within harassment?
So, Azam, I think false reporting cases just discredit the entire process. After so many years, we are talking about this subject so openly, which in earlier days would be a taboo discussing also. So, we've built up like a form of system awareness, the policies, there's a Workplace Harassment Act also, and then come along these false cases. So, I think, people really need to be very serious with how they approach it, and they shouldn't, like, for their own personal objective or their own personal motivation, misuse this whole procedure. Because, when an independent inquiry is conducted, so naturally the things do come out in the open. And then when, in case of false, claims, you're discrediting the whole process so much, and you're feeding into the cliches. The cliches that are present, the biases that people have. Like, for example, like on the road, when they say a person is not driving properly, they say it must be a female driver. Just like that, you then play into those biases, and it's extremely discrediting the whole process that's been built up with so much care and with so much struggle. So I would really suggest that nobody should use it for a personal motive or a personal, thing.
Of course.
And when you do use it for a personal motive, it can have very terrible consequences, because I'll just quote a little play that I saw. I believe in social media a lot, and I think that social media plays, dramas can change a society. And there was one, I don't remember the name, but I do remember the theme, in which a young student accused a professor of sexual harassment. And the consequences of that was that his entire family was ruined. His child faced the consequences of that unjust accusation. He couldn't go to school anymore. And besides that, the professor was so devastated that he committed suicide. These are outcomes of wrong reporting. So where our society is coming together and addressing harassment and addressing how wrong it is, when you take it in a different connotation and use it to try to benefit yourself for any small purpose or any purpose at all, the consequences can be disastrous. And this is what we need to recognize. It's very important that our society recognizes both sides of the board.
It's a moral responsibility, actually, I would say. It's your moral responsibility, actually, to be like, very truthful in such situations.
Responsibility and understanding, I think this needs to be built into the policy and the process itself. The investigator who is investigating need to be trained into it, to pick up on the science and the proofs and the completely objectively. And it happens especially in the opposite gender a lot. It is a little lesser when it comes to the bullying in the same gender. It happens for the personal gains in the same gender in the power play. But in opposite gender discussion, this happens a lot, where one's gain is another's loss. So it's all about how do you build it into the policy as well. There has to be a check and balance.
Absolutely. No, the kind of courage it takes for someone to speak out is completely washed away when there is just one case out of 100.
True.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But I do want to talk about now the policy aspect and what organizations can do. So I'll go back to Sajad, who is online. And my question is very direct. What all should be a part of the perfect harassment workplace training? What is its end goal? Should harassment training even have an end goal? And how do we create the organizational culture change that ensures that workplaces become truly safe and inclusive? Sujat?
Yeah, thanks. I don't know if there is something called a perfect training. Doesn't matter what topic it is. Trainings can always get better. But I think to that extent, there are three aspects of training that I think we need to think about, or we need to cover as far as harassment is concerned. The first one is the content, right? So we talked about education and awareness. I think that has to be part of it. What is harassment? What kind of harassments? In this discussion alone, I've learned a few things new which I did not know, right? So microaggression being one of them. So, like really holistic awareness and education, the content part of it, that's point number one. Point number two is the process, right? And employees and we need to understand that whether we are committing the crime or we are the receiving end of it. So what is the process? If you commit a crime, what is going to happen? What is the company going to do, right? And if you're on the receiving end, what is the process? How do you report? So clarify that. So, and I can tell you from my experience in other areas, a lot of things get better when we create awareness about the process, right? So as awareness is going to increase, the so-called utilization is going to improve as well, because employees will be like, oh, I did not know that. Now I know, oh, I have been at the receiving end, or I've been doing it, right? So it helps both ways, clarifying the content and the process. The third one, specifically in this case, is the implication. We have to make it very clear, and we have to be very transparent. What are the implications of? And again, I talked about the tiered system. In many companies, smaller issues go with a verbal warning, sometimes a written warning, and third one is termination. I have actually come across, unfortunately, in my own career, a couple of people who I saw got terminated because they did something, and it's basically absolutely no go, right? I'll give you another couple of examples. The CEO of CNN a few years back and McDonald's were both fired for violating one of this policy, a sub part of it. So, when I talk about companies, they take it very seriously. As we've talked about, the implications are quite wide. So the training has to be the content, the process, and the implication. To make it effective, and you're asking about the culture, I think I shared before as well, nothing gets done overnight. You have to keep doing it over and over again. I'll give you a simple example. The companies that I work for, we have to go through the harassment and the InfoSec policy and all these trainings every year. It's a pain, but we have to do it, and there's no other way. And to make it even more effective, I think what you have to do is you create a training where you just don't go through the content online or whatever. You actually have to give a test. So my last company, they actually ensured that they want employees to pay attention, right? So they actually created a test, and the passing was 80%. You had no choice but to really listen to the trainings and to understand what the content was. and then give answers. So you could not BS your way through the training itself. So in my view, we have to keep doing this. We have to make it holistic. We have to get every employee to do it. Unfortunately, in many cases, this is the feedback I get from an HR perspective as well, that the employees do the training, the leaders don't, right? Actually, it should be the leaders starting and then doing a top-down approach so that employees also have no choice when they realize that the leader is also doing the training.
Ja, thank you so much. You've talked about the process, the knowledge, the content, and I would just add one more thing to that, which is make the reporting process simple, so that everyone knows and that it is easy to report and you are confident that some action will be taken and independent. I want to ask Ms. Muniza Bhatt one question. You said that organizational culture is how you feel on a Sunday afternoon or evening about going to work on a Monday morning. How do we make that feeling better? How do we change the organizational culture?
Okay, so Azim, you know what? So that comes from a top-down approach actually. You see, if your leadership and your owners are very serious and very committed to zero harassment and not tolerate it at all, that would then translate into appropriate policies. Policies would be clear, comprehensive, and consistently enforced. And after that comes the accountability part. For example, if there is a case which has been reported, you have to set in the accountability for that and let it be known to people so that there are lesser instances. You know how it is, like they see what has happened, the consequence, and they get deterred themselves. So the top-down approach is very essential in controlling this feeling that you have on a Sunday evening or going to work on Monday.
Well said, well said. So senior leadership, CEOs, they have to live, breathe, embody the message of a zero harassment policy. Bilkul sahi, bilkul sahi. Because I read a stat somewhere, if harassment happens in a company, 25% are likely to report it, 50% are likely to tell a colleague about it, but almost 80% are going to tell someone outside the workplace about it. So if there is harassment happening in an organization, the company suffers the most. With that, we are going to move to our question and answer session. I can see several questions up on the screen. Let me read the first one and then we'll decide which panelist wants to take this. How can females save themselves from harassment by a female boss? These questions are from our audience members.
That hits home, really. That hit home. I would.
All right.
Yeah. So we need to understand where it is coming from. This is coming from the internalized misogyny. And what is internalized misogyny? It is minimizing the value of women and understanding that their gender roles exist. And agar tum kar rahi ho to kaun si badi baat hai? So the internalized misogyny is also an attempt in a culture where there is a larger number of men or larger number of female exhibiting a behavior and the other person is trying to make the other person fit in. How do you save yourself? First and foremost, if the entire culture is supportive the way we have discussed, the most important thing is empathy. One person who is experiencing it towards the other person as well, where that is stemming from. And then matching that energy. That's very important. You need to define your boundaries very respectfully, but also all of these, I'll be very blatantly saying, if the process and the culture and everything is not in place, move. Because you cannot fight against the system. If the system is there, you can take the help of the system to create the boundary with the empathy, with the respect and the dignity at work. These three are the most important part. However, if the system and everything is not in place, it doesn't mean that you don't know. You have to know the system is there or not. And if it is not there, it's your job to help the organization to create it for yourself. Just say कि आप मेरे तो boss नहीं है तो मैं छोड़ के चली जाती हूँ is not going to work as well. But you have to have a systemic barriers removed by empathy, by looking in the systems and finding the loopholes and creating help within the organization and not doubting yourself, requesting HR and whoever is responsible for the training to make the trainings and sort of environment for them. If nothing works out, then understand the system is not there. So don't waste your energy into fixing yourself, because you don't need to be fixed or fit in, but you need to actually match what is happening.
Absolutely. I read this quotation a couple of years back, which went a little something like, trust your gut even if you can render no reason.
Yes.
And that's at the heart of experiencing harassment. And I like your advice, which is try to change the organizational culture, but a single person swimming against a current, you will exhaust yourself swimming against the current. You will get multiple paper cuts with sanitizer day in and day out. Atik, we've got another question as well. This is from the organizational side. How do organizations ensure that policies in place ensure transparency for all? Ma'am.
So like as Abhat said, if the system is there, you would definitely know about it, because if the organization is committed towards zero harassment, they would naturally flash it all over in, on the billboards and whatever, in the the notice boards and all that you have in your company. So the first step is when they are, advertising it in their own company, the people opening the complaints, basically, the hotline complaints, it should not be any single individual. It has to be a group of individuals, from like different departments, I would say, so that they can analyze it. And it's just, to remove the subjectivity part of it, so that, if there are like 4 or 5 people who are handling a complaint, so a certain form of transparency would come in as it is, and then they also have to, as I said, make sure, and they have to have case studies, basically. So as we talked about the training, I think Sajjad spoke about the trainings and all. So when you are delivering the trainings, I think you need to have an assessment test about before the training, see how the organization is approaching it before the training, and what are the outcomes of the training, how many complaints you had before the training and how many you have after the training. And then you also have to flash, your case studies, make case studies which are relevant to your organization and circulate them, because when they are like relatable, that's when people will also be able to like, be more aware and have the same perspective as what is being said, and how they need to tackle it. So all these, I think, would add up to the transparency.
I absolutely love your advice. So if a company is carbon neutral or has very few emissions, they will showcase that. And if a company has a zero harassment policy, they should definitely showcase that as well.
Exactly.
I like your suggestion of a pre-test and post-test as well. Look at what is the impact assessment of your harassment training. That will really help companies improve. We've got perhaps time for one last question, and this one is for our online panelist. What kind of people within the organization should be part of the harassment investigation committee? So friends, someone that will believe you instantly, who should be part of the committee?
Best practice suggests that it should be part of the HR operations team. Okay, a couple of reasons for that. Some of these, investigations or complaints can be very, very personal. They can be very, very sensitive. Sometimes they also actually, we're talking about harassment and all that. Sometimes it's also around what we call cyberbullying, right, where sensitive information can be involved. And again, because employees' data, sometimes in some cases, extensive cases, families can also get involved. In most, the best people to handle this would be the HR operations team members. In large organizations, actually, we have dedicated what we call reporting analysts who actually deal with investigations. One of my friends, she's working for a big company. They're a retail organization, and they actually have a team of these people whose entire job is to only look at these incidents coming in, investigating, and figuring out who's basically done, is it the right thing to do or not? And then, the necessary actions are taken. Again, because due to the sensitive nature of these investigations, disciplinary actions, the incidents that actually happen, in my view, in my experience as well, I would say within HR, as part of the HR operations team, there should be somebody assigned specifically to look at all these incidents.
Please.
Um, the two laws actually defines it as well, that who should be part of the investigation, who should be part of the decision-making committee. There is a whole process to it. But kind of people, very simple. Anybody who does not have impact on employees' employment decisions should be part of the investigation committee. Because no matter how, even if the HR BPs are part of the talent management discussion, they should not be part of the investigation team. So anybody who can have a right or a say during the employment life cycle, for example, promotion, increments and all that, they should be part of the investigation committee because they will be going deeper into the employee cycle. And that will ensure the transparency. For example, in Jazz, we have a separate investigation. It's not even part of HR. It's part of the compliance. Why? Because they are not making decisions based on their salaries and stuff. So the more clarity you create against the investigation, and then the decision making should not be in the hand of the investigation committee. Decision makers are different, reviewers are different. As Maniba also said, that has to be the steps so that the clarity and the transparency come, and the person knows there is no retaliation impact on my employment decisions. That's the kind of people you want in the investigation.
Absolutely, and we haven't really touched upon the online or digital implications within cyberbullying. Someone making a fake profile, pretending to be you online, and perhaps with cutting edge technologies like generative artificial intelligence, they can perhaps help detect it sooner, advise on policies, tell you who to go to. We will definitely pick that up in following iterations of the School of Tomorrow conference. Just something, a reason to come back next year. But ladies and gentlemen, could I please request a big round of applause for our panelists. And an equally big round of applause for yourselves. Thank you so much.